For more on this issue, let's bring in ABC News Chief Legal Analyst Dan Abrams. Thanks so much for joining us, Dan.
Hey, Lindsay.
So let's start with Trump's threat to regulate or close down social media companies. Does he have any authority to do that?
Well, I certainly think when it comes to shutting them down, he doesn't. When it comes to regulation, he can try, but it would be difficult as a legal matter to figure out exactly what authority he has. Now, if Congress wanted to join him in the effort, that would be a different story. There is a specific regulation on the books called Section 230, which specifically deals with places like Twitter, Facebook, with regard to what the rules ought to be, what they are, what liability they have. If Congress wanted to join the president in making changes in that law, that could happen. But the president alone would have to rely on the FCC or the FTC, meaning the Federal Trade Commission, that usually deals with unfair practices. And it wouldn't be an easy road and likely would be deemed unconstitutional if he went too far.
So social media companies like Twitter and Facebook have chosen to fact check or take down some posts that they say are false. Are they required by law to do this? And if they do fact check some posts, doesn't that mean that they maybe should fact check everything that's posted to their platforms to make sure that they're not biased?
Right. So let's separate out the legal question from the practical and PR question. The legal answer to that is no. They don't have to fact check. But certainly they're allowed to put the fact-checking badge that they are putting on there. The second question of once they start down that road, do they then have to fact-check everyone? Well, that's not as much a legal question as a practical one, meaning that if they do start fact-checking the president or more Republicans, for example, they may have to answer questions to their community of people who use their product to say, wait a sec, here's why we're doing it, here's why we're not, et cetera. And it may be more difficult to explain if they're only selectively fact-checking. But as a legal matter, it probably doesn't have an impact unless they start literally becoming a publisher as opposed to a forum. If they really started getting into the business of putting out content and regularly talking, engaging with the content that was on there, that would be a different story, but they're not there yet, and I can assure you they don't want to go there.
And that point you just made is one that Senator Marco Rubio made, saying that social media companies like Twitter aren't liable for false information on users' posts on their sites because they're considered forums and not publishers of information. Rubio argued that once they play an editorial role, these companies should lose those legal protections. Does he have a point?
Well, he has a point if they move too far towards serving an editorial role, but that's not what we're talking about here. Also, let's point out that this week, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on a very similar question here about what power Twitter has to ban someone. And a very conservative commentator challenged a decision that Twitter had made and lost in the D.C. Circuit in a unanimous opinion. So that's not good news for the president and others who want to say, we ought to be able to regulate this. We have to be able to regulate this, because if this ends up in court, it is likely a losing argument for the president if they go beyond just minor issues like saying, we'll create a place where people can file complaints and things like that, and literally get into the business of starting to say what content they can or can't publish.
Well, Twitter in the past has been reluctant to fact-check or censor the posts of world leaders, including President Trump. I mean, he's been in office several years now. Why make the distinction at this point and change course now?
Well, look, it seems Twitter has changed its policy more broadly. And the key for them in maintaining credibility is that they have to apply it across the board. And that's not just politically, but it means you can't just target the highest profile people. That if you're going to have this policy in place, you're going to have to apply it to Twitter users in general with regard to fact checking. And it is interesting in this particular case to see why they decided on this comment about mail-in voting, as opposed to some other comments that the president has made that some could argue even needed a fact check more so than this particular allegation. Without making a judgment on how much this one needed or didn't, it's interesting that this was the one that for Twitter crossed the line.
Dan Abrams, thank you so much for your insight as always.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.